turtles.
We're on page 520. This is chapter 28.
5 years in prison. pretty strict against.
We're talking about animal evolution here. And we're going to first do the invertebrates, which is this chapter, and next talk about the vertebrates, which is the next chapter. And the new AP exam doesn't stress this stuff like it used to. So I'm not going to take you through this entire chapter bit by bit. And we're just going to spend one day on this entire chapter. And I'm just going to kind of give you the overview of what these organisms are. They're animals. All animals, and it shows this figure on page 522. This is chapter 28.
So what does this test cover?
Which one?
This test.
The test you're going to have
Yeah.
coming up in my class?
Yeah.
24 through 28?
So it's all plants and then one chapter on
What's your
animals.
test?
That's right.
That one last
These are all SRQs.
I think it's like 29.
Syllabus-related questions. You have a test Tuesday the 12th over 24 to 29. All right. Are we back? Y'all back with me? Hello. So, what are animals? Animals are multicellular creatures. They're heterotrophs. You know what heterotroph means?
They eat their food.
They have to eat. And thus, if you have to eat, you have to move. So they're all mobile to some extent. Well, not all of them, but many of they either move themselves or they move their environment like a filter feeder does and gets the water moving through it to feed. So we got many groups of these organisms, and it shows them all here on this chart. This is you probably recognize this diagram. The first organisms, the poriferans that we'll study, also called the sponges, they are the simplest of the animals. Sponges were the first animals ever on the earth, and the fossil record shows that they were around about 600 million years ago. Filling up the bottom of the oceans, a bunch of cells living together.
Animals are only 600 million years old.
About that.
Wow.
Pretty young.
Yeah, before that it was all single-celled creatures, you see. But they came together to make a sponge. And a sponge is just a bunch of single cells living together. There are sponges that you can take them and shove them through a sieve, through a screen, and they break up into their individual cells, and they all swim back together to remake a sponge. How cool is that?
Have they ever
See, our cells are too dependent on one another to survive alone. But these cells can survive. I don't have any video footage, but I've seen some on TV somewhere.
Can part of a sponge survive?
Yes, a piece of a sponge can break off and multiply into another sponge.
Oh,
And that's reproduction by what's called fragmentation.
Is that what starfish do?
Starfish can do it too.
Have they ever all became single celled?
So like split
He does.
He does
Right.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Does that happen in SpongeBob? I
Yeah.
haven't watched every show.
He does it in the intro.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like when he takes off his arms, like keep going, and like 100.
We should watch SpongeBob.
There's
I
some
am.
purple sponges.
Do you know the parts of the sponge?
Probably not.
I bet this is gonna be like on the real AP.
Can we get
That'd be
this
funny.
from you guys?
Here's a sponge spawning. It's spraying sperm out into the water. The sperm will float through the water and will come into another sponge, and the sponge will use the sperm to fertilize one of its eggs, and then release the fertilized egg into the water, and the fertilized egg will float around in the water and eventually land somewhere and grow into another sponge.
So it never intends to reproduce by fragmentation?
No, but it could if it was torn out by a fish or something like that. Piece tears off. SpongeBob!
You predicted it.
Who made that noise?
I'm ready.
Are you ready, kids? Aye, Captain! I can't hear you! Aye, Captain! Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants! And Zorpin and Joe and Forrest is he? SpongeBob SquarePants! If nautical nonsense be something you wish, SpongeBob SquarePants! And you're up on the deck and crawl like a fish! SpongeBob SquarePants! SpongeBob SquarePants! SpongeBob SquarePants! SpongeBob SquarePants! SpongeBob SquarePants!
Nautical nonsense be something I wish. Sponges are filter feeders. They have little cells lining their insides that beat their flagella, and it pulls water through and out the top, and they strain the water for the food, you see.
What is this called?
Filter feeding.
Wait, what are the cells called?
Those cells are called
cells.
choanocytes, or collar cells. Yeah, we had this in marine bio.
So the
If you're
cells
interested
that
in this stuff, we
filter-
spend a lot of time on it in marine bio. You want to take that next year?
Let's do it.
Marine bio is like the best one. I suggest everyone take it.
Now, the next group of organisms that evolved were the cnidarians. Now, cnidarians had cells that are living so closely together that they really can't break apart and still survive on their own. They become totally dependent on one another. And we say that this is a layer, they evolved, the cells evolved in layers called tissue layers. And a cnidarian has two tissue layers, an outer tissue layer and an inner tissue layer. And the outer tissue layer is kind of a protective layer usually, and the inner tissue layer is a digestive layer. And so food will be taken in the opening and digested inside, and then spat out after it's, the waste comes back out the same opening. So that's simple. Animals have just one opening to their digestive system. It's not very complex because you can't be eating more food as you're excreting food. So it's kind of inefficient. In other words, you can't continually eat. You have to eat and then digest and get rid until you can eat again. Higher animals have evolved a long tubular digestive system where the food goes in one end and comes out a different hole. And then you can continually eat, you see, because the waste is coming out a different opening. And that's more complicated. But the cnidarians are still pretty complicated creatures. They've evolved these special stinging cells, so all cnidarians can sting. So we're talking about jellyfish, sea anemones. There's a sea anemone. I just like to say sea anemone. Coral. You heard of coral?
I got stung by coral.
Did you really? Yeah. Coral can sting. Portuguese man o' war. Did it leave a scar?
Yeah, it's fun.
Still have the scar? Was it fire coral?
I think so.
Yeah.
There's this tunnel of coral like that, but it was all underwater, and I was snorkeling with my little sister, and she would dare me to swim under it, and I got really skinny.
Ah, your little sister.
I got stung by a man o' war.
My sister did.
I took that picture on the beach, a bunch of jellyfish.
Really?
I
Washed up with
saved
the
all
tide.
of them. I saved all of them when I walked on the beach.
You saved them?
Yes.
Oh.
They're probably already dead.
Isn't the Portuguese man one of the deadliest jellyfish?
I think it's the box. I think it's the box jellyfish.
The box jellyfish. It's pretty dangerous though.
Yeah, like have you seen Killer Jellyfish on the Discovery Channel?
Yeah, I haven't. I've seen parts of it.
Yeah.
So the next thing that evolves are worms, and there's different types of worms. Some of them are microscopic. A lot of them swim around in the ocean, and some of them are on land, of course, living in the soil. This is a flatworm. And flatworms still have the old body plan. They have one opening right here where they take food in and they let food back out the same opening. These are the simplest, these are the oldest organisms that evolved a nervous system that has a brain. They have a brain and some eye spots that can detect light.
Looks really cross-eyed.
And yeah, it looks cross-eyed. They're really cute little creatures.
Aren't they all like hermaphrodites and they battle for each other for food?
Yes, these are hermaphrodites. You're right.
And they like and they fight each other for who becomes the mother.
I didn't know that.
Flatworms.
Wow.
But
Interesting.
My flower drawing is really cute.
if you think about jellyfish, they don't have a brain. They have a real simple nervous system called a nerve net with no central brain that can do any thinking. Jellyfish are completely pre-programmed. In other words, you touch it here, it does this. It feels the current here, it does this. It doesn't do any thinking. But the evolution of a brain is when thinking came about, and these are the first things that have something similar to a brain. So these can actually make decisions to one point. Should I go over here or not? They're not nearly as complex as decisions that we make, but there is some decision making going on in these simple
Are they the first ones?
nervous system. There's what its nervous system looks like. What's that?
Are they the first ones with the nervous system?
Yeah, well, jellyfish have what's called a nerve net, which is a very simple nervous system. But planarians are the first one with a brain, which is a complex nervous system.
Planarium is a worm.
Yeah, it's a flatworm. It's called a flatworm because it's real flat.
Wait, flatworms are the first to have brains?
That's correct.
So jellyfish don't have brains.
Jellyfish do not. They have a nerve net.
Do they what's in them? Do they have
They have jelly in them, actually.
nothing else?
It's called mesoglia. And what they have is, let's go back and look at the... Thought I had, okay. So here is an outer layer of cells, which is like the epidermis, and there's an inner layer of cells. And then between those two layers, there's jelly, which isn't cells, it's stuff secreted by the cells. It's called mesoglia. There's that word. I like that word. And it's just a jelly-like tissue between the two cell layers.
What's it made up of? Just fats or sugars?
I think it's fats and sugars, yeah.
So,
You should show the video of the feather worm. The red one in the tank. It's like the coolest video ever.
The feather worm?
You know the red one with all the little things in it? I swear to God I know what I'm talking about.
It wasn't a flatworm?
Yeah, it was some type of worm, but it was called a feather worm because it had 1,000 little legs. That looked
Here's a
like
flatworm.
ooh,
Oh, yeah.
ooh, that's weird.
That's disgusting. Do they only live underwater? I thought they were
Most flatworms do.
microscopic.
There are some flatworms though that live on land, but most of them are in
Can
water.
they attach to your skin?
I don't know.
I thought they were microscopic.
No, the flatworms can grow pretty big. And some of them are real small, but some of them grow big.
What the heck was that?
These are some worms that are parasites and can live inside the body. Have you ever heard of tapeworms?
Is that a flatworm?
That's a type of flatworm.
Oh, yeah.
Also, there's several types that cause various diseases. This is just showing a blood fluke, if you've ever heard the word fluke. These are little tiny worms that get in your bloodstream, and they're microscopic, you can't even see them. And then they go through a life cycle where they reproduce in the water and can crawl and penetrate the skin of an animal like this person is standing in the water. It can go through your skin and develop, grow to adults in the blood, mate with one another in your body, lay eggs in your intestine, and then you crap out the eggs. And if it gets into water, then it will invade the body of a snail and eventually change form to this larvae that can re-penetrate the skin.
You should watch Monsters Inside
It's a
Me.
bad disease you can have.
What show?
No,
Monsters Inside Me.
Inside
See?
Me.
Ew.
Oh yeah, that makes.
I like that show. I mean, they cover
Freaks
a
me
lot
out.
of stuff, you know. I like the one about rabies. You know, this girl was really sick with rabies, but they had no clue what it was, and then she died.
Ooh, I don't know if I have
Which
12.
is really scary, you know, because.
I probably have at least 6, I would think. Yeah, can you send somebody over here like toward the end of school? Because I have next period for. Okay. Okay. All right. You're welcome. So these blood flukes cause various diseases. This one's called schistosomiasis. You probably haven't heard of it, but you probably have heard of tapeworms, which are worms that can get in your gut. And you think about, worms, but, maybe a small percentage of people have these types of things. Over half of people in the world have intestinal parasites, worms.
But not all of them are.
Most of them are not in this country because we inspect our meat. We have FDA inspectors that look at the meat and look for little worm eggs and worm cysts. And we cook our food usually, whereas people in the bush in Africa, they catch something, they might cook it, and it might not get fully cooked, We tend to cook our food better. And then we go to the bathroom and toilets. And the sewage goes to a treatment plant that hits it with chemicals and radiation that kills any worms that could have been in the feces. Where you get these problems is when people use rivers or lakes as toilets, and then the worm eggs go from the intestine into the lake, and it could develop. That doesn't happen in this country, so we don't have much worms in this country. But most other countries don't have the sewage treatment like we have. And so especially the countries with lots of people, third world countries, India and Mexico and places in Africa that are very poor, they don't have it. And so they have all these diseases.
Are all worms that could be inside of you bad for you?
No.
Well, like you can carry a tapeworm your whole life and not know it.
Okay.
And live your whole life, and then when you die, it'll die.
How do you get worms in your
But if you get enough of them, you'll start to suffer from malnutrition because it's eating your food, you see,
Yeah.
and you aren't getting the nutrients.
So gross.
It used to be a diet.
Yeah, like people who want to lose weight, on purpose, swallow tapeworm larvae.
Bad idea, though, probably.
I watched a
And
movie.
they do lose weight. There's tapeworm.
Why would how do worms get in your brain?
Well, there are kinds that come out of your blood and encysst themselves in your muscles or in your brain, and they can get in there that way.
It can cause like meningitis, right? When your brain swells up, when your immune system attacks it, and that can.
Your immune system, in fact, attacking the invader.
Monsters inside me. Teach you a lot about this.
Yeah, they can get out surgically, or you can take medication that'll kill it.
Wait, how do you lose weight with tapeworms?
They eat your food.
Because most of the tapeworm's food goes to it reproducing. They produce something like 1 million eggs an hour or something like that, and you crap out all those eggs.
Oh.
So you aren't getting the test for tapeworms is they go through your doo-doo and look for eggs, and that's how they find that you have a tapeworm.
So it's like a
So you crap in a big thing and you hand it to them and they go through it. Imagine if that's your job.
Yeah, how do they treat tapeworm?
There's some chemicals that'll kill it.
Yeah.
Is that why there's the girl in the Speed Labs who killed him?
Yeah, I know Charlie.
The guy or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know Charlie.
There's a cyst that's in the muscle, a worm cyst. And see, if you eat a pig or something and you undercook the food and you get one of these cysts that's encysted in the muscle of the pig, you then can get the tapeworm. So you make sure you cook all your food. You can't get worms from it.
You have to make sure you cook pork really well because pork has a lot of that stuff, I think.
Have you ever heard of elephantiasis?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
That's a worm infection that stops up your lymphatic system. That's what this guy
There's
has.
another picture of that on 538.
Is that that
yeah.
thing behind him? Is that part of his leg?
Yeah.
Yep.
They can't cut that off.
There's no way to treat it.
538.
538 bottom.
I don't think I can look
Bottom
at
right.
it.
I think look, that's the effect of the worm.
Yeah, that's the effect that a worm has. It stops up your lymph system.
You can't do anything about
No,
that?
there's no treatment. I'm pretty sure. You have to keep it really clean, or else it'll get infected. But
Hasta la vista.
Terminator.
Where?
I might have to skip
Okay, then you have your mollusks. You ever heard of mollusks? Not mollusks. Mollusks. They're soft-bodied creatures that evolve shells like scallops and mussels. And, well, octopus lost the shell, but they have a lot of other cool ways of protecting themselves. Like camouflage. Have you ever seen this? Look at this video. Can you see the octopus?
there he is. See him? Right there.
Bam!
Do it again.
Gosh.
They can change the color of their skin to whatever color they want.
Oh.
And so, they're masters of camouflage.
I had dreams about getting attacked by
They can blend in anywhere. So, they found other ways to survive without the shell, but most mollusks have shells, and that was a good way to go about living. Squid, they do pretty well too without an outer shell. They're fast swimmers and
Giants.
such.
Right.
And we see organisms getting bigger through evolutionary time. Squid can get enormous. They can get longer than this room.
Yeah. And we don't know much about the giant squid, do we?
Not much.
Seen that video?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a cool video on the internet of giant
We
squid
should
that
watch
they've got
it.
on camera. And then after the mollusks, you have the annelids and arthropods. Now, annelids are another type of worm that's more advanced, a segmented worm. And there are worms that live in the ocean that are segmented. Have you ever walked in low tide on the beach and you see all those holes in the sand? Those are wormholes. You see, there's worms under the sand there. And when the tide comes in, they stick their head out and they filter feed. And when the tide goes out, they go back down in their little hole, you see.
Don't you know
There's
Einstein
hundreds of
knows about
worms living on the shore there.
Octopus and squid, are they worms?
No, those are mollusks. Mollusks are soft-bodied creatures that,
Wait, so mollusks don't have shells?
well, some do and some don't. Like scallops and oysters have shells, but octopus and squid don't. Squid have an internal shell, but octopus don't. Well, crabs are the next step. So here is the segmented worm here that you see, like an earthworm. And so segmentation evolved. Segmentation is an easy way to make your body long, because you're just like copying the DNA instructions for making one segment are just repeated over and over again. So it's a good way, it's an easy way to grow in size, is to just copy one segment over and over again and make a long body. So you get these segmented worms, and there's a couple of them maybe.
Oh, they fuse, right? They.
Yeah, they're both have both male and female there. What's that called? It's hermaphrodites. Those are leeches. See, a leech is a segmented worm. You see the segments?
There's places.
What is it on?
Someone's back.
They're
It's on
sucking
someone's
the
back.
blood out of some surgery guy. A lot of poorer countries use that instead of the sophisticated machines for removing the blood.
Does it work?
It works great. But just people in these countries don't want to have worms all over their
So
body.
bloodletting actually did work. It just wasn't the best way.
Well,
It's
some-
useful for some things.
It's just we use it for too many things. That's why I was.
Yeah, people were overusing it. Now, finally, the next evolutionary step was jointed appendages. Arms and legs that have joints, you see. That was a big evolutionary step. And basically, a worm evolved with arms and legs.
You wanted a joint.
And these things got long and able to, so the animal's able to move around real well. And some of the appendages evolved to be able to fly. And so insects are real successful. It's not just insects. Arthropods are the name of the group. That includes insects and lobsters and crabs and crustaceans. All those shrimp and krill. They're a very successful group, and they all have in common that they have jointed appendages, and they have an exoskeleton that protects them from the outside. Now, one of the problems with the exoskeleton is that it's heavy, and so nothing with an exoskeleton can grow very big. The biggest thing with an exoskeleton are crabs you see that might get about that big. That's pretty big, but that's not like an elephant. So the exoskeleton limits their growth because it's heavy. But it has real good protection. And what they have to do every once in a while when they're to get from small to large is they shed that exoskeleton, get rid of it, and that's why you see those shells of horseshoe crabs washing up on the beach. They shed their exoskeleton and they grow a new one. But they're vulnerable after they shed it until the new one grows and hardens. So it's kind of a tough way to live for some of them, but they manage. And
Like
so,
soft-shell crab.
soft-shell crab is after they shed the exoskeleton, they kill them and eat them, and you don't have to worry about breaking the shells. Yeah, that's kind of a delicacy.
So good.
So there's just millions of different types of arthropods.
Look
They
at
come
the-
in
go
all
back to
sorts of
B.
shapes and sizes.
Go
What's
back to
that?
B. Go back to B. Look at the weights. I know.
Yeah, they're real thin.
Yeah,
How's it
that's a
even,
wasp.
We need to know
How's it
like
actually
all the
fun?
like parts of these things.
I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what's out there. Really, if you follow... There's a horseshoe crab, yeah.
How big is this giant?
Giant scorpions are about like that.